Good evening, members and officers of the Council and members of the public. Welcome to this meeting of Governance and Audit Committee. Just a quick little bit of housekeeping. The fire alarm procedure: if the fire alarm is activated, vacate the offices via the stairs. Please do not use the lifts. Assemble in Hawley Square on the green. Officers will assist you and advise when it is deemed safe to return to the chamber. Does anyone intend to film the meeting? If yes, say. Nope. Fabulous. Restriction on mobile phones. Would everyone present please ensure their mobile phones are turned to silent and that they are not used to make or receive phone calls in the chamber while the meeting is in progress. Please note this meeting is being live streamed for members of the public. The meeting will also be recorded and will subsequently broadcast on the Council's YouTube channel. Are there any members who wish to speak under Council Procedure Rule 20.1? No. Moving on to agenda item 1, apologies for absence. I've received apologies from Councillor Lees, Braidwood and Whitehead. Are there any other apologies for absence?
Charlie Lee.
Yep. Thank you. Agenda item 2, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Cool. Agenda item 3, minutes of the meeting held on 27th of July. I'll just quickly pass over to Mr. Blundell to give a brief update on some of the matters arising from those minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, so at the last committee there was a request for a couple of updates. Firstly, for the Director of Property to update the committee on his plans to address some of the service issues around rents and the like. What I would say is that his approach and the strategy that we've got for that is very much still in development at corporate management team level. There's been a request that's been put to us for some more resources. However, we're looking at it to make sure it is a sustainable request, which in theory it should be. However, it's still to be agreed as to the exact amount of resources that will be made available to the Director of Property in order for them to address some of the issues that were raised at the last committee meeting. So, Chair, the intention is to invite the Director to come to the November meeting of the committee, at which point the corporate management team will have had the opportunity to determine what the appropriate approach is to address the issues that are currently being experienced across our portfolio. Secondly, there was also a request to have an update on ICT, and the head of ICT across the East Kent Services Partnership will also be in attendance at that meeting. There were 2 items there. I believe it was raised by Councillor Lees, the risks around home working and also the approach that we've got for disposal or recycling of ICT equipment, and the head of ICT will give an update to the committee at its next meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. To approve the minutes of the meeting held on 27th of July 2022, you would have received a copy attached to the agenda pack. Please can I have a proposer and a seconder? Proposed by Councillor Duckworth. Seconded by Councillor Towning. Unless I hear any objection, I will take these as approved. Fab, thank you. Moving swiftly on to agenda item 4, Quarter 1 Review 2020-22 to 23, Treasury Management and Annual Investment Strategy. Mr. Blundell, would you please present the strategy report?
Thank you, Chair. Not much to say. It's been a really quiet week in the financial markets. Not much going on at all, really. In terms of this report, it's actually off the back of, again, of a request from the committee last time for us to review our investment strategy. It's this effectively is a holding report, so it gives you an update of how we performed in the first quarter of this financial year, again with a promise for a further in-depth review of our strategy at the November meeting as part of the mid-year review. What I can say is that fortuitously, I can't say it's based on my grand judgment, we're actually in a reasonably good position because of the fact that we've kept most of our investments short dated and liquid means we stand to be able to benefit from the significant uplift in interest rates we're expecting to see. So for the council's perspective, that's actually beneficial for us. All our borrowing is fixed, the external borrowing we have, so the interest rates won't vary there. But the investments that we hold are variable in nature. We're already seeing on the bond market that rates are getting close to 5%, and we're expected to see the interest rates for the bank rates to get around 5 to 6% over the next 6 months. The table that's presented in this report is already out of date, so what I do have that I can share on the screen up there with you now, which has just been received from our Treasury Management advisors this afternoon. In fact, if I can get the right document here. So this is, let me try and find the right forecast. Sorry, I'm just scrolling through. Here we are. This is the forecast that they're now producing. You can see it's got yesterday's data, only received today. I'll try and blow that up so it's a bit easier to see. Scroll across. What we're looking at here to the top line, that's the bank rate, the base rate that's set by the Bank of England. They're forecasting that interest rates will increase to 4% by December, maybe sooner than that in my personal opinion, but and then peak at 5% for the majority of 2023 before tapering back off by the end of this time horizon, this 3-year time horizon they've got there. I'd say that's it's fairly speculative at the moment, particularly the tail of that projection as to how quickly interest rates go down. If they do it too quickly, there's a risk that they would further stoke inflation, which is obviously the Bank of England's primary remit and concern. If they do it too slowly, they risk prolonging any sort of retrenchment in the economy, any depression in the economy, or lower growth, or actually recession. So I'm sure you've all been seeing what's been going on in the financial markets. For us, an authority from a treasury management perspective, and this is what we're looking at this report, it is actually quite beneficial because we stand to generate more interest from our investments that we hold. So we've got £50 million in our investment balances at the moment. If we can get near to 5%, if we were to hold that on average across the year, obviously that's £2.5 million worth of investment income for the council, which is considerably higher than what we've been receiving previously. If you recall, we were getting around 0.1% previously, which was the base rate. So, that's that's a significant increase on the rate of interest we'll be holding, and we're covered off from a debt perspective. So we look at that in the round, though, when we're considering our budgetary position, because there's other factors that come into play when we're looking at the economic position at the moment. Most primarily is inflation, and we're seeing that obviously with the impact on the value of sterling, which means lots of the goods that we import, namely fuel, is linked to that price, and our refuse vehicles, the diesel costs are expected to go back up there. Matt Sanham is the director or acting director for that directorate at the moment, and we've just been speaking only today around how the monthly fuel costs have peaked around £50,000 per month. They're starting to come down, but we expect that they will now again begin to increase again. So it's a rounded picture for us. This report just solely focuses on treasury management activity. We'll continue to obviously report to the committee as of what impact that has on us. Going forwards, though, I think it's most likely that we will continue to keep our investments liquid unless we can lock in any of these higher rates for a longer period of time. I think it's unlikely that they'll go beyond the sort of 5% peak that we're looking at, so that would be an opportune time to lock in a longer rate. But I think the primary thing we'll be looking to do is continue with our strategy of internal borrowing. And what I mean is using our cash balances, that £50 million, to fund investment in the capital programme. So rather than going out to borrow from the market externally to finance our capital programme, we'll be using those cash balances. Means there's less available for investment, and so we won't necessarily get that rate of return. But equally, if that's what the bank rates will be, the rates of interest that we will borrow at will be in excess of that. So there's always a margin. So that will continue to be our strategy, at least for the next quarter, until we bring back an update at the mid-year point to the committee. So appreciate there's quite a bit in this report, but because of the nature of where the markets have gone over the last week or so, and actually a little bit before that, sterling was starting to drop a little bit even before Friday. Some of these figures, a lot of the figures are already out of date, but happy to take any questions on the substance of the matter.
Councillor Yates.
Thank you, Chair. It was just a question, so the £50 million kind of cash that we invest, we anticipate will be 5 or 6%, but our borrowing rate is our external borrowing rate is much lower. What roughly is the average external borrowing rate in comparison?
I've got it on here, if I just try and find the right table. Bear with me, unless it will be on the borrowing section. Right, so I'm just trying to find what our actual average borrowing rate is. I'm not sure if it's in this report, but if you go to section 4.2, see this was looking at the end of June. So external borrowing rates, if we were going to borrow for 50 years from the PWLB, we're at 2.2%, before rising to 2.7 in May and then 3.4 in June. They're already now at 5%. So if we're looking to borrow from PWLB, even though bank rate hasn't increased, because the market's pricing it in, we'd already borrow at 5%. Our actual average borrowing rate is lower than that because of the historic rates that we've taken the loans out at. There is a figure in there somewhere, but I'm struggling to find it at the moment. Matt, yeah, I'm not sure if it's in here. If that's okay, Councillor Yates, I'll be able to give you and the rest of the committee a written response to what our average rate is. I can't say exactly what it is offhand, I'm afraid. I think it's usually in our reports, but I can't seem to pin it down in this report at the moment.
That's fine, thank you very much.
Thanks for that. Yeah, I just want to check my overall understanding of it. So you're just the sort of headlines of the whole thing are that the changes in the base rate. Did you say it's expected it's an extra 2.5 million income per year on the council's investments, and then this was offset. You said that the other effects of was the extra cost of fuel, which is it was the 50,000 pounds per month. Was that the total figure?
Yeah. So there's thank you, Councillor. There were just some figures for to exemplify the situation that we're looking at. So 2.5 million it basically is an indicator of the type of investment income we can expect to receive based on assuming £50 million was the balance that we'd be holding throughout the year. That is a high balance compared to historical levels, partially due to the fact we've got lots of money in from some of the levelling up funds and the market town deal funds in advance. Some of that will be spent and those balances will start to drop. So 2.5 million, you're probably looking, I would say, anticipating spend probably closer to 2, maybe below that. Sounds reasonable. If you were to look at our investment balances have been around 50 million, but we're getting 0.1%, a bit north of that, you'd be looking around the sort of £500,000 mark as an average return, I think is what we're looking to get from our investment income. So there's somewhere, I would say, between next year's budget that we can look at, all things being equal, a big chunk, possibly a slug of around about £1 million worth of additional investment income. That's probably a prudent estimate for us to look at. However, that's probably going to be gobbled up pretty much immediately by a lot of the pressures we're looking at that are inflationary in nature. So fuel is just one of them. Our biggest inflationary pressure will be on staff pay, because if you think we've got a net budget figure of around about £18 million, 19 million pound, within that figure there's for the council overall, I'm talking about budgets here rather than treasury, staffing costs are around about are they 16 million pounds. So if we're going to have It's obviously subject to negotiation with the unions what the exact rate is, but you know, if you see a 10% increase on that, that's a comparable uplift in the cost. So I'm not expecting this to clear all the decks of all our financial pressures, and that's just staffing costs, as I've already alluded to. We've got inflationary pressures elsewhere on energy, fuel and the like. So it's very welcome. It's from a treasury management perspective, but I think the point I was trying to make is that you've got to look at it in the round. Although we're just considering treasury management here, from a budget management perspective, this helps us, but correspondingly, some of the market movements can be detrimental to us at the same time. Okay, thanks.
Any other comments or questions from members? No, I have one. Section 3.9, around the approved limits.
Yes.
If you could expand a bit more about that as to how that happened and if there's any consequences from this error and what's being done to mitigate that.
This is, as it says in the report, this has happened twice. What we have is a £6 million limit in terms of the amount of money that we place with any one counterparty, another body that we invest with. So we put an investment with another organisation, another fund of £6 million. The reason we set those limits locally, and the reasons we do that, is to basically manage and spread our risks. You don't want to put all your eggs in one basket, because we've got £50 million. If I was to see something that says, oh, this is going to give us a 10% return, let's put it all in that, effectively it's a little bit like backing one horse race, because if that fund goes belly up, you've lost all the money. So we're spreading our money across multiple funds to mitigate the risk that one particular investment goes under. So that's, to start off, that's the context of why we have that £6 million limit in there. What happened in this instance was we had money to that sum, 6 million, deposited with a particular fund. We'd given them instructions that when we receive interest on that fund, it's to be paid to our main account, our main bank account. What they did in error was to credit that money to the investment account. So we had £6 million of the amount we've invested plus the interest that they put onto the account. So in effect, for a day or so, well, a week actually, between the 1st of June to the 8th of June, and then from the 1st of July to the 4th of July, there were instances where we were around about £5,000 over that limit. There's no consequence to the authority, apart from that we are duty bound to report to you that we've breached our limits, and in fact we've got too much money with one counterparty. Am I concerned? No, because it's a marginal risk compared to the level that was invested. Am I annoyed? Very. And we've spoken to the company that manages this investment and given them very clear instructions that it's not to happen again. Otherwise, we'll be looking at other arrangements in terms of where we place our money. Effectively, it's an administrative error on their behalf, but we obviously are duty bound to report a breach of the limit.
Thank you, Chris. Councillor Hopkinson.
Just another thing to clarify my understanding. So is it right? So we have a roughly £50 million investment fund at the moment, and I haven't read every word of the report. Is there information in the report about which investment funds we're using, and also to what extent has that been subject to political discussion in the past about where we are investing in the council's funds?
I don't think it's appended to this report, but typically we do give a breakdown of where the funds are invested. There's no political involvement in the placement of funds. That's purely delegated to staff and myself and my team in terms of where we place that money. Where the member involvement comes in is when we're setting our strategy to say the types of institution that we want to use, the types of instruments that we want to use, what our risk appetite is. So, for example, we won't place it in line with our strategy. We won't place an investment with anything that's below a certain credit status. So to manage that risk, we also won't place an investment for anything that's longer than a year or typically longer than or in excess of £6 million. So those are the parameters that the committee effectively sets and gives us a framework to work within, but it is delegated to officers to decide where we put them. To be fair, there are obviously wider concerns as well. I think it's fair to say the environmental, social, governance agenda is coming to the fore more, and it's a really difficult one to circle to square in terms of those considerations, because you can be investing with one fund that looks squeaky clean on the surface, but actually where are they then placing their money subsequently could be some less desirable from a particular perspective, and also sometimes these things can be subjective in nature. But we do try to avoid funds that would be, could be, I'm trying to think of the right set of words, could be considered to be inappropriate for us to place with. So particular, we've not got any investments with Russia, for example, or we would avoid placing money with any other particularly nation states that have got questionable track records around human rights and the like, or we, but I don't think we have in the past, but I know, for example, an authority I worked with previously, they had placements with British American Tobacco because they gave very good returns. But then there's questions about an authority placing monies with a firm that actually its objectives are in opposition to perhaps the objectives of the council itself that are looking to improve the health and well-being. But those are the things, sorry, it's a very long-winded way of saying the framework is set by members when we set the strategy, and that's why that's an important report, but it's actually delegated down to myself as Section 151 and my team more widely to determine which funds we place the money with on a day-to-day basis.
Try and make this the last one, but so where exactly in the council is that? You said it's members setting that overall strategy. Did you so is this committee or?
Yes, it comes to this committee and then it goes to full council as well. So it's part of the budget setting process. So it goes to council every February as part of the budget setting process. So I believe, assuming we're in the position, it will come to this committee in November as well. Alongside the mid-year report. So that's the opportunity to have a look at. If there's anything in the strategy that you don't particularly like.
So, sorry, so in the agenda for the next meeting, we'd get details for this, which we could then discuss.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments? Yeah, Councillor Duckworth.
I note that you actually used the money market in the report.
We don't tend to use brokers. We tend to place the money directly through a portal. That's called. It's a portal called the ICD. I can't remember what the exact the acronym stands for, but that's a portal that allows us to place directly with particularly money market funds. However, we have been since we brought this report, we have been engaging with different brokers, about 3 that we've considered, and that will be part of the update because we'll need permission through the committee for us to use those type of brokerage firms. So we'll give you an update then, but we have been exploring our options, but we haven't used brokers in the past. That's an accurate statement, or is there anything further? No.
Because brokers are going to give you the actual backbone to organisations that you're looking to invest in. Like we talk about quality in the firms.
Yes.
I mean, there are different standards of banks. Each bank has different
Yes. So that's, sorry, Councillor, to interject, but that's also what we rely on our treasury management consultants to provide us some advice on. So we engage with Link Asset Services. They've provided some training to the committee in the past. They give us a framework of actually the types of investments we might want to be looking at, and also they've got a colour rating. It's not quite a RAG rating, but it's a colour rating that tells you how much you should put with that type of or that particular, not just that type, that particular investment. It could be Goldman Sachs, it could be Nationwide, could be one of the banks in Canada, and they'll tell you the amount that you should place with them and what the recommended duration is as well. We can breach that because that's just advice, but effectively I don't think it would look very good if it was audited by Christine and her team if we weren't following the advice of our Treasury Management Advisors, and we don't as standard course. We follow that as a framework. But the brokers, you're correct, they'll give us some additional information to layer over the top of that advice that we already receive.
Councillor Duckworth.
Thanks. So on the brokers, and to do with what Councillor Hopkinson was saying, can you get ethical brokers that would help you to choose ethical investments?
I'm not sure about. I might bring Matt there. He's shaking his head. We can't get ethical brokers, but they will advise on whether a fund has ethical credentials. Typically, obviously, you will be taking or accepting a lower rate of return. Not always, but typically when you're investing in those, because some of the less ethical investments tend to generate higher rates of return. And that's where the conflict comes, because this is a treasury management activity, and our primary responsibility is to get the best yield by actually keeping the investment secure and liquid. Within the framework that SITFA sets and the legislation sets, it doesn't actually bring in ethical considerations, but that is something we're mindful of. But when we're looking at investments, I am set under statute the responsibility, our primary responsibility has to make sure we don't lose the council's money and that we're getting a good return. But we try to look at it in a holistic manner. So what I'm trying to say, probably in a pretty clumsy way, is if there was an investment out there that's a vanilla investment, hasn't got ethical credentials, but is secure, is liquid, and is giving me a good rate of return, I've got to consider how big is the differential compared to an ethical investment. And if it's too much, it's very difficult to justify that and wouldn't get over the tests that were sort of set around the potential code, the Treasury Management Code, and all the other sort of statutes and frameworks we have to follow. Matt, is there anything else you'd like to add to that? No.
In fact, we're exploring opportunities at the moment with regards to those type of investments, and they are few and far between at the moment.
Yeah.
We've spoken to 3 separate brokers.
The recommendation is that the committee notes the report. Please may I have a proposer and a seconder. Proposed by Councillor Yates, seconded by Councillor Hopkinson. Unless I hear any objections, I will take this as approved. Fab. Agenda item 5, the quarterly internal update reports. I'll now introduce you to Christine Parker for the report.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, before you is the quarterly update report. I'd like to take you through the highlights of that report, starting with page 25, if I may, the table at paragraph 2. This shows the 5 key areas that were reviewed during the period and gives you the number and criticality of the recommendations made in each of those reviews. The pages through 25 through to 30 then report the executive summary from those individual reviews that have been concluded, and the key areas found both to be working well, and alongside those the opportunities or the areas identified for internal control improvements. As is normal practice, those, once completed, the progress report for each of those will be brought back to a future meeting for the committee, so that you can see how well the recommendations have been progressed. Talking of which, page 31 details the progress reports undertaken in the period. And the matters really to draw your attention here are the 3, so equality and diversity remains a limited assurance, and there are 4 high priority issues where I think more timely review is required here. You'll see from the detail in the committee report that we haven't received any sort of update on when we can expect these recommendations to be implemented. That said, obviously, there's been quite a lot of change in the responsibilities in that area, so I'm sure it will be something that will be picked up in due course. The playgrounds review, again, whilst it does sit at a reasonable assurance for you members, there are 4 outstanding high-risk recommendations that are yet to be actioned, and again, no revised dates were suggested to us in that progress report process. Conversely, whilst the street cleansing does remain, as previously reported, as no assurance, there is a very positive direction of travel here that we can talk to you about. So since presenting the original review to committee in March, management comments in the detail do include updates now for completions for new revised dates. There are the 4 critical and the 1 high priority recommendation yet to be actioned, but we do have officers with responsibility here who can give you a detailed update. But as I'm reporting, that things are moving quickly forward. And a lot of the recommendations hang off one thing, which is the service standards being approved. Once that thing is in place, and then a lot of the others fall out of that. So we can hear if you've got questions about that shortly. Moving forward, page 35 details the plan completion to the 30th of June. And just to update, to the end of August, plan completion was at 35% against a target of 42%. And that just varies across the partnership, so we're not overly concerned there. Page 46 details the areas that we've reported previously to you with lower levels of assurance that are yet to be followed up. Some of those are now allocated and are work in progress, so you can look forward to seeing those progress reports at a future committee meeting. And then page 47 is our performance metrics for the audit partnership, again to the end of June. We're nearly at the end of the second quarter already. So that concludes my presentation, members. The report is for noting, and I'm happy to invite any questions, as I say, especially as we've got colleagues here who may be able to take any updates forward for you. Thank you.
Councillor Garner.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for the report. Yes, I would like to ask a couple of questions about the street cleansing update you gave. Obviously, I think most of us will agree that of the number of areas we get contacted by residents, and which are high profile among residents, street cleansing is quite near the top. So it's important that we do get on top of our street cleansing activities. So you said you have more confidence that things are happening and that things are going to be improving based around service standards being approved at a future cabinet. So could I hear just a little bit more about how sure we are that these service standards are going to be approved at cabinet, which cabinet that's going to be, and a bit more about why you have more confidence in some progress being made, because some of these actions have been outstanding for a number of multiple months. Thank you.
Thank you. Through the chair, as the director responsible is sat to my right, I'm going to ask him to give you an update. Thank you.
I can't comment on why it didn't move forward previously. All I can comment on is why it's going to move forward now, and that's I'm now involved in the process, and it's now my responsibility to take it forward. I have a draft set of service standards with me, which will be not with me here, but they are with me to sign off on. I will be taking those back to CMT, not next week, but the week after for discussion. Once they're signed off by CMT, they will be put on the next available agenda that I can for Cabinet. So in that respect, I can confirm, as Christine said, that they are there, they have been taken forward, they are with me to sign off and take through CMT. I think you'd agree that, the zonal cleansing is working. It's seen improvements in various areas. I think the public generally have liked that zonal type of cleansing operation. It gives us more flexibility. It gives us the opportunity to do the deep cleans and hit the areas where we need to, when we need to. So that's where we are at the moment.
I will just add, I agree with you, but there has been a noticed improvement in some areas, so I don't want to sound completely negative, and I will pass on that part of my ward is the car park next to the railway station in St Peter's Park Road, which is the bane of my life with people contacting me. there was a noticeable improvement there a couple of weeks ago when there was obviously a hit squad went in there and cleaned it up. So thank you for that. It will need to be doing again very soon. Thanks a lot.
Councillor Towning. Councillor, can you put your mic on? Please.
Sorry. Councillor, we're forever attacking Councillor Bayford because people have no respect for that area. It's right beside a medical centre. We have cleaned up the car park, the old coach car park ourselves. Something needs to be looked at more closely in the cleansing of that area. I mean, I'm quite happy to organise meeting you there and having a chat, because you know it's a really eyesore, and especially in the summer, because along Palm Bay Avenue is a lot of free parking, and you have visitors coming there. It certainly doesn't give the right impression of us as Thanet people, you know. And it needs to be looked at. They do go and tidy it up, but I don't think they do it as often as they claim to do it. Thank you.
All I can say is, once the new revised service standards are in place with regards to cleansing, there is a plan that, as part of that process, the supervisor of vehicles as they drive around Thanet will be taking snapshots as they drive, which will then give us sort of stills of the district and how clean the streets are and how clean the various areas are. And if that's one of the areas that they're cleaning, it's one of the areas that they'll pass, so we'll get pictures back. Those pictures that are taken won't be being assessed by the cleansing team or that service. They'll be farmed out to other officers within TDC. There'll be a list of around 20 different officers within the council that will review those images. So if we find that there's hotspots where they're regularly taking pictures and the rubbish is building up, they'll be targeted more frequently.
Councillor Towning.
The other thing is, I mean, are you familiar with Princess Walk? That's the top of the cliffs. There are absolutely no bins along there. And rubbish, I mean, if there are no bins, people can't put their rubbish away. It's as simple as that. And that's something that you're, you know, through your progress and through your appraisal of the area, that you ought to have a look at. Because the lorries actually go along the top of that road. So it's not that they're having to make a special effort to go there to collect the rubbish. It's there. Okay? Thank you.
Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Chair. We in Birchington, we've got 2 recycling depots, which up until recently were overflowing, and we suspect fly tipping. I'd like to say thank you. We actually got the signage moved so that people could see it as they drived in, and it has died down a little bit, especially when they'd been told that people are taking photographs of the rubbish. Could you give me the figures of anybody that you actually caught through that intel and were prosecuted? Because I think that's the only way you'll stop it. Make an example and go the whole way. A £30,000 fine will stop a lot of fly tipping in those tips.
I will get the figures, but I don't have them to hand. But I will look into it for you as part of this and come back.
Councillor Duckworth.
I see you're undertaking work on the complaints monitoring, and can I suggest that we need a clear flow chart on the Thanet District Council website, because I think if complaints aren't resolved, I'm not sure that residents really know what to do in that situation. I know there's a complaints form and they get a reference number, but sometimes that's it if it doesn't get resolved, unless there's something that it may do later on the line. But I know I know specific residents for which it hasn't, and I certainly can't see a flowchart on the website.
Thank you. I'm sure access and clarity and helping customers know how to complain will form part of the scope of that review, which we'll report back. Thank you.
Councillor Yates.
Thanks, Chair. Just to clarify, the Thanet Lotto item, has Thanet Lotto now closed, and is it no longer operational? And second question, just about CCTV, and what are the next steps then for the council to resolve that specific item that's been highlighted? Thanks.
Do you want me to answer that? Yeah, that's fine. Sure. I was just waiting for you to direct it to me, but that's fine. I didn't want to steal your thunder, but I'm happy to answer it. Thanet Lotto is operational. It had to close for a period of time because there wasn't an active licence holder in place. I am currently the licence holder for the Thanet Lottery, and we're looking to appoint at least, or have appointed at least one other director to avoid that happening again. It arose because there was a situation where the previous licence holder that was a member of the corporate management team was no longer actively employed by the council, and as such we had to suspend the lottery for a period of time. We've had an operation, I think it was a period about 7 to 8 weeks, was closed, suspended for? No. Yeah, it's been operational again since then, and I don't anticipate we'll see that problem again in the future, because as I said, we'll have further licence holders in place. So to say, if I was no longer at the council, someone else will be able to step in and provide those licence holder responsibilities. I'm not able to answer the CCTV questions, if I can defer that to you, Christine.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Yes, indeed. We brought the original review of CCTV with no assurance to the previous meeting, and I'm pleased to say we were able to give a verbal update on the evening, and it is on page 5 of our agenda pack under the minutes. And if I just read to you, CCTV had no level of assurance due to lack of privacy zones on the cameras, among other areas, among other issues. Sorry, management had advised that a number of the agreed recommendations had since been implemented, including correcting the privacy zones. So the really critical risks had been addressed by the time we brought that to March committee. The work in progress for the follow-up, I can't guarantee it'll be completed for the December meeting, but it would be in our interest to bring that back to you and confirm that we have independently tested all of those recommendations are indeed implemented and effective, and would look forward to revising that assurance for you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other questions or comments from members? No? I've got a couple. Just to spice things up. Going back just to the Thanet Lotto, one of the findings was that there was £50,000 there not yet distributed. Is there plans in place for that to start being distributed in a transparent way to community projects?
We did have a plan during some of the lockdowns. The intention was to allocate the money to some of the food banks in the district, but at the time it was there wasn't a need, which sounds surprising, but the food banks were sufficiently funded at the time. There isn't a current active plan to my knowledge, unless Matt, you can update consequently if there's been any further.
Not a plan per se, but we did also match a £2,000 contribution from the unions to.
Thank you.
I can't remember what the cause was now.
It was Ukraine refugees.
So it
Yeah,
was
so
agreed
some-
2,000 was matched against the union contribution. So money has started to be distributed, but obviously 50,000 is still a significant amount of money. There is a plan in terms of having a conversation internally about who will be the lead on that now moving forward, and I think it comes back to the changes in the organisation and the capacity to be able to deliver it, but it will then be allocated in an open and transparent manner to good causes.
Great. And in terms of the equality and diversity most of it is obviously was allocated to staff which are no longer here. Have we now got a lead person to drive that forward, because it's quite important?
I think I'm almost following on from Matt's similar themes. She may want to duck and cover, but it is sitting with Samira, but she has a very wide remit, and right at the top of that is the implementation of the IMO's recommendations. But the Equality and Diversity previously sat with Estelle Culligan, so Samira and I will be sitting down to have a look at that at some point in the near future. But yeah, it's a bit of a juggling act because of what's going on at the corporate management team at the moment. We are awaiting the restructure of the corporate management team because we're all stretched a bit thin at the moment, but I don't disagree, it is an important priority that does need addressing.
Fabulous. And one other question, which kind of overlaps a little bit with that one, but also the work done on the recruitment process. So the piece of work on the website about recruitment process. I know previously there was an audit on website accessibility, so I just wonder, was that touched on in terms of our recruitment process? How can we make ourselves more accessible for people with additional needs? And also something to consider, has the council ever considered trying to become a disability confident employer as well? So I just thought that might be something, it's not necessarily the right forum here, but it might be something to look into.
Thank you. The scope of the review is probably broader than that that's shown at paragraph 2.3.1, very much though about our internal procedures around selecting the best candidates. The equality and diversity item, obviously, as you say, correctly, it links in. And I think this was probably the first review we've looked at on the sort of e-recruitment process as well. And I think with the digital enhancements, I'd like to think the answer to your question is yes, everything is made much more accessible. But clearly it's about placement, isn't it, and making sure that those vacancies are made available. So yeah, I think there's always more that can be done, isn't there? But there is good strategies in place for that. Thank you.
Great. The recommendation is that where have I lost it? The committee notes the report. Can I have a proposer and a seconder? Proposer by Councillor Wright, seconded by Councillor Duckworth. Thank you. Moving on to the annual governance report, I will introduce you to Samira Khan, who will introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, please accept my sincere apology for the lateness of this report, which was beyond my control. The report should have been with yourselves in July, but it's here now for your comments. The annual governance statement is basically, as you're very, is a statutory document which we are required as a local authority to produce and explain the process and procedures which enables the council to carry out its functions effectively. Attached to the report, there is an annex which is the draft statement for the council, which members are asked to approve. The report is presented basically for the year 2021-22, which is the last year from April to March. And in reliance of doing the annex report, I've had to draw in some of the sources, such as the minutes from the various working parties, committees and so forth, which is all set out in the annex. In particular, I'd like to draw members' attention to pages 4, which sets out the internal audit work undertaken. The report was presented to yourselves in July last year, July just gone, which basically gave you some of the work for the last year. Then the page 8 talks about the corporate risks for the council, which includes the limited resources that we have and the disciplinary and the grievance procedures and matters which are still ongoing this year, but it sets out in sort of brief details as to where we are with that. Then page 8 talks sets out the complaints that the local government ombudsmen are actually dealing with at the moment. For the year 2021-22, they had a total of 30 complaints from various residents and so forth, out of which only one was upheld. under the category of maladministration and injustice, and then one where they was also same category, but they classified that they received a satisfactory response from the organisation, so it was upheld, which is remarkable after 30 complaints that the local government ombudsman dealt with. They then set out the Imr Reports and its recommendation, which is from page 10 onwards. Members are asked to note the report and any comments they wish to make. I'm happy to take any comments. And the report is as set out before you. Thank you.
Councillor Garner.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd just like to ask about the complaints piece that you outlined. 30 complaints received and one up or two upheld, but one with no further action. Is that a significant change, or is that something that you would expect? That sort of percentage of complaints being made that are actually upheld, which is very small. I mean, is there maybe a trend of, how shall I say, malicious complaints being made? Do you see a trend through there? Is there a common theme of the type of complaints that are being made that are inappropriate and not being upheld? Just wonder, is that what you would expect, that small amount of upheld complaints?
Thank you. Yeah, basically it's quite a good turnout just to have 2 complaints which are upheld. Normally local ombudsmen draw quite a lot into it, and with the number of complaints that we've had, I think it's a very good turnout. For one way they upheld, and then the other one they felt that the local authority dealt with it appropriately. So effectively, it's literally one that they upheld. So yes, from my experience, it's a good turnout.
Sorry, that's not, it is good. I understand that, but of all the other complaints, I mean, have you got a view as to whether there was some malicious complaints being made, inappropriate? Is there some sort of, I don't know, publicity needed to educate people who are making complaints inappropriately? It seems quite a lot of people are making complaints that are being dismissed without any basis.
I don't know the actual nature of the complaints individually, because obviously it predates me, so I don't know each one of them, but I can assure you that at the moment we are inundated with a lot of complaints. Some of them can be vexatious, some of them can be quite unreasonable, and they do sometimes go to the Ombudsman. I'm happy to, if you want more details, I'm happy to delve into the data that I've got and give you a written response, if that helps.
Yes, please, thank you.
Councillor Yates.
Thanks, Chair. Just on that item that Councillor Garner raised, are we allowed to know the details of the maladministration and injustice that was upheld on the Ombudsman's complaint on page 8? And if so, can I have the detail?
I will check on that one. As I said, it predates me, so I don't know if we have the published. I'm sure we can. Well, yeah, I'm sure we can. I will find the information and I'll come back to you on that, Councillor.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? No? Good. I found one typo. Under external audit reported that Mr. Grant Thornton, I mean, I didn't realise it was an actual person. I was like, oh my God, we've got the big guy here. Yeah, just the Mr. Grant Thornton, so that was it.
Thank you, sorry about that.
So the recommendation is that the committee agrees the draft annual governance statement. Can I get a proposer and a seconder? Proposed by Councillor Towning and seconded by Councillor Hopkinson. Thank you. Moving on, unless I hear any objection, I'll take that as approved. Great. Moving on to agenda item 7, risk management. Chris will introduce this report.
Thank you, Chair. Just for a little bit of context before I hand over to Amy, who's our insurance and risk lead officer at the council, who's actually done all the hard work in presenting and producing this report. So at the last committee, we presented to you the updated risk management strategy, which effectively is the framework that we're going to follow, that how we will do risk management here at Thanet District Council. We made a good start on implementing that, but we haven't had all the returns back in line with our new format and style of reporting. As such, this report is following the previous style of reporting that you've seen. So it's not strictly in line with our latest update risk management strategy. It follows the format that you will have seen previously, but the future committee reports will be presented in line with that updated framework that we're following. So we're just stuck a little bit between stools at the moment, so that's why it might look like it's not changed that much. The only real sort of change that you will see is the work Amy's done. She has included or enhanced or expanded the list of risks that you'll see in the appendix. So those are the risks that don't meet the highest rating score, and they've largely been derived from some of the service risk registers. But I'll, without further ado, I'll hand over to Amy to give you an overview of what the quarterly risk update is showing.
Thank you, Chris. Hello all. So just to follow on from what Chris said, we have made some really good progress in the new risk registers, but as Chris alluded to, unfortunately the new strategy is in between stools. So next time we see you in November, we're hoping to present something a lot more engaging and relevant for you. So we're just going to present it in the current format and hopefully wow you next time I see you. So going on to the corporate risks, they haven't changed. None of the corporate risks have actually changed in their scoring since last time, although there are some updates on them. So what I plan to do is just give you a brief overview on the updates on the corporate risks and then take you through the annexed risk, which is the new part of the report that I think we did touch on briefly last time, but it'd be good to bring that alive. And what we're hoping to do is have an engaging atmosphere here so I can take away your comments to the service areas and come back next time and give you some answers to the questions, which I won't have for you immediately, and that's what I'm hoping for, this sort of engagement between ourselves and yourselves in the G&A committee. So just looking at the corporate risk, and I know we did spend some time on this last time we were here. I just wanted to touch on cyber attack. Now, funnily enough, just before I came into this meeting, I had a report from our brokers in respect of cyber, and the market has hardened significantly, and I think we've alluded to that before. However, it is quite serious now that we are going to struggle to get cyber insurance. Now, luckily in insurance, and actually we've been talking about this for some time with our partners at ICT, we've realised that it's going to be quite difficult for us to get any sort of cyber cover. So what we've been doing is looking to mitigate that risk by looking at risk management in terms of cyber. So we are starting to look at risk management solutions with our brokers and with various different organisations, not just with the brokers. We've looked at risk management partners, which is one of our insurers, and our main insurer, which is Zurich Municipal. We are going to have further updates to that, but rather than looking to insure ourselves against cyber attack, we're actually looking to stop the source of these before they actually happen. So they say prevention is better than cure, and that's what we're looking to do. So further updates on that, but I do believe going forward cyber insurance isn't the way forwards for us, and it's going to be about strengthening our systems and looking at our risk management techniques and mitigations that we can put in place before these cyber attacks happen. Another update that I've got, and please feel free afterwards to ask me any further questions on the other corporate risks, but I believe some of them have remained quite static. The other one that I do believe we have updated recently is the limited resources, and as you're probably aware, we're commencing the budget bill process for 23 to 24, and that's against the background of high inflation and increased prices, which I'm not going to wax lyrical on because of course we've spoken about this in this meeting. Of course it does create uncertainties, and allowing the council to set a balanced budget, especially with ongoing unknowns around government finance settlements. So as in prior years, this means that council are restricted to setting a meaningful budget for 1 year and through scenarios that can be put forward through the medium-term financial strategy. A budget position cannot be guaranteed due to the various factors outside of the council's control. And I do believe the other one that I did want to update you on was just berths 4 and 5, because I think this has been updated. The berth installation work commenced in June, due for completion at the end of September. I'm not sure if we've got any other updates on that at the moment. The berth customer aggregates will fit in, so we fit an aggregate conveyed to the berth following completion of the berth installation. These delays have resulted in financial risk to the council due to the extended berth outage and associated contractual costs, and I'm sure you can ask questions about that in a moment. So that's the big corporate risks that I wanted to touch on today. But what I would like to draw all your attention to is the annex. And this is the bit of work that we discussed last time, and this is the thing that I really want to draw your attention to, because these are actually the risks that are our service risks. These are the risks that we're facing every day in our day-to-day working throughout different service areas. And you can see actually throughout the annex the actual sheer variety of risks that you've got here. So you've got everything from sort of procurement risk through to service risk from operational, we've got health risks and so on and so forth. So what the aim here is a lot of these are future risks, these are emerging risks. A lot of these are risks that we know are coming. So as I mentioned last time, for whoever was here last time, we're looking to be more proactive. So rather than wait for these risks to actually happen, let's start doing something about them now. Let's start discussing them now. Let's put things in place. Let's actually watch our mitigations work for us. Let's not just wait for it to happen and then do something about it. So we have got some increasing risks coming up, like with burial space, which is the first one. Now I'm sure you guys don't need me to take you through each risk individually, but these are the ones that we are discussing at service level. These are the ones we need to bring to your attention. I need you to care about these. I need you to want to be engaged with these, because then I can go away and ask those questions to the service areas and ask them what they're doing, challenge their mitigations, work out what we can do going forward. If it's not working, let's do something about it. So the burial space one, I think, is quite a pressing problem. I think we can all agree. There is some plans in place to reuse ancient graves. Now, there is a bit of flux at the moment over at the crematorium, which may impact on this, sadly. And I'm sure that's something that the service area will work on. But I think right now the crematorium has got some issues in terms of the management, with the sad passing of the crematorium manager. So that's something that we will be visiting with them, but it's potential now, not until the next risk registers go out. Again, looking at things like the reduction in supply base, and funnily enough, just before this meeting I was actually talking to Gemma, who's actually one of the managers over in procurement, and this is something, especially with the financial situation that we've got out in the markets, there is a chance that reduction in supply base could mean that we're not able to actually complete the right procurement methods. It could be that when we're going out to tender, we actually haven't got enough people to tender, and it's actually something that I'm seeing in the insurance market as well. We went out to tender for some of our insurance products last year, and because of reduction in supply base, there was one policy, we only had one person actually want to put in a bid. And so if we're seeing that in the insurance market, which technically has a lot of bidders in there, then we're going to see that across the board. So Gemma's been looking at mitigations for that. Jackie Baker's park, which is something of a service risk. Now, this has there has been some issues with this building. The roof had fallen in, and so on and so forth. The building has been fenced off to stop access. I know that open spaces are working hard to mitigate that risk, but there is a longer-term plan needed for this particular area. And we go on to HAVs monitoring. Now, this is something that I'm sure you guys are probably already aware of, is HAVs, and we know that a few years ago this was something that really did affect us as a council. What's been happening is that although we've been able to monitor HAVs, the way that HAVs has moved on, and we're now looking at things like whole body vibration monitoring, it means that the way that we did monitor HAVs is maybe not as effective as we wanted it to be. So we are looking now to mitigate this before it becomes a problem. We have got a lot of people on what's called 0 points, so they can't actually use any vibrating tools. And that obviously means that that is a pressure on the service. We need people to operate vibrating tools, but of course, if they're on 0 points, they're not allowed to. So there's a balance there between what the service needs to deliver, but actually people's health as well. So it's quite a fine balance. So this is something that we need to find a solution to. And from a service delivery perspective, it can have a big impact. And then we go down to the last three, you'll be pleased to know. External funding on regeneration. I think we've actually maybe covered that off today as well, a little bit, so I won't go on too much about that. The next one's an interesting one, actually. So the risk of harm to the public from uncontrolled use of powered watercraft. Now, we live in a coastal area. You know, these are the sorts of things that necessarily you wouldn't think about on a corporate risk review, but actually this is something from a service perspective is actually quite serious. They have now recruited a beach and coastal manager, which is great. Lisa has now started. They've got the water use group. So I think this one we will probably look to update more fully in the next one. It potentially could be that this will drop off of there now that we've recruited the new beach and coastal manager. The final one is one of my favourites because it's something that's quite close to my own job, which is the algae. We have had some very large, what we call actually catastrophic claims come in from slips on algae. We've actually defended all of them successfully, and one of them was £1 million claim. We've actually defended all of these claims successfully because we've been able to demonstrate that we inspect the areas, that we have a stringent and very good cleaning schedule in place. However, there is an argument here that we don't clean these areas because actually by cleaning we could be inviting claims, we could be inviting the liability. So this is something that's going on, and we are actually taking risk management advice from our insurers and our risk management partners on this. So again, you know, we're looking to provide additional signage. Unfortunately, again, signage can actually give you admission of liability because you're saying, oh, you could slip over. So you're telling the public they could slip over. Is that an admission of liability? The jury's out on that at the moment, and again we're still investigating that with our risk management partners. I expect to see that one drop off eventually because given that if we tell people it's going to be slippery and don't walk on it, you'd think that they wouldn't. Unfortunately, that's not always the case. But we have now set a precedence with our insurers to say that we can repudiate these claims. So again, that helps us to drop down the risk. So those are the risks that we've got on Annex 1, and that's pretty much it. And what we expect to see next time is not just the same risks on here, but we're looking to update the mitigations. That's not just about saying, okay, we've still got the same risks, we might still have the same risks. What I'm hoping to let you guys know is actually what we're doing about it, the updates on the mitigations, what lessons we've learned, and what we're looking to take forward. And then take questions from you back to the service areas. What are your concerns on our risk management? What would you like us to see be done? And that's pretty much me presenting your risk management report. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Are there any questions or comments? Councillor Garner.
Thank you. Thank you, Amy. And I do look forward to the new format report, although I have to say you have brought this alive with your presentation, so thank you for that. I did just want to ask one question about the PSPO risk relating to a risk of harm to the public being hit by watercraft such as jet skis. And there's going to be the enforcement officer employed from next year. Now, I assume that that would be an enforcement officer covering the whole of the PSPO, so that's not that doesn't just cover, obviously, being hit people jet skis and watercraft. There are a number of other things covered by the PSPO, like unlawful vehicles parked by the coast and hopefully unlawful littering and stuff like that. So would that enforcement officer cover a number of other areas apart from the jet skis?
I can pass this over to Matt, who's much more well versed in this type of situation.
He said it could be reduced by the recruitment of PSPO, so it's not necessarily that we'll go down that road. It's looking at opportunities to mitigate the risk on the foreshore, and it's just an opportunity for mitigating the risk. But yes, you're right. Ultimately, if we were to recruit an officer, if that's what we looked at doing, they would have a much broader remit than just managing jet skis. They would be looking at cyclists, barbecues, all sorts of things that happen on the coast. And realistically, it's never going to be one officer managing the whole of the coast. What we'd have to do is look at opportunities to how we can finance that, because they're not self-financing those type of resources, as you can imagine, because they couldn't possibly issue enough fines to be able to cover their own salaries. So it's just about, this is an opportunity to look at wider options with regards to the coast.
Councillor,
sorry, can I just follow? So will there be an opportunity for us to be involved in that assessment of how best to enforce the PSPO, please?
I think ultimately what would end up happening is if we go down that road, if it was, for example, taken forward as part of the budget process, then ultimately it's going to be in the papers that are going to end up going in front of Cabinet. So it will be available for discussion as part of that process. Realistically, we're not at that point at the moment. It was something that was explored as an opportunity previously, probably about 6 months ago, leading into the summer season to try and manage it. And it does come down to some extent to affordability. Moving forward, yes, I think there will be an opportunity to have a wider discussion about what that might look like and what sort of things would be the focus and priority of those type of resources.
Councillor Wright.
Okay. Thank you for saying that you're going to look into the cyclists along the foreshore. With all due respect, at the moment, I have a beach hut. With all due respect, yes, there are good cyclists. There are some very ignorant cyclists. But I think one of the larger problem at the moment is scooters, because they seem to think that they rule the road. And also, I've noticed that there's an increase in mobility scooters, but they're not people that need mobility scooters. There are now double-decker mobility scooters that are riding along in procession, and they are definitely not disability. These are people buying mobility scooters. One thing that I'm not sure if anybody realises, I did look into the scooter, the mobility side. When you purchase a mobility scooter, it is actually registered with the DVLA and you are given number plates, but the number plates are optional. And I'm wondering if we could do something about that.
My initial response would be, if you're talking about a vehicle on the road, it's going to be a police matter. So from an enforcement perspective, it would be for the police to manage. Whether it's something that we can raise as an issue through, our contacts with the police is an option, but ultimately you are talking about enforcement matters, and to some extent it's the same with the scooters. The scooters are used on public highways now, and they become a police matter as a result of it.
Thank you, Chair. I'm mindful that this is GNA, not scrutiny, or OSP. However, and as such, we should be looking at the risks and the controls that the council has in place and how we're managing those risks. However, if this particular risk is something that the committee has significant concern from, the monitor officer may correct me if I'm wrong, but the committee has the ability to request that Cabinet consider it. Is that right? Yeah. So if you wanted to raise this risk further off the back of this committee, it could be a recommendation to Cabinet to consider it.
Councillor Yates.
Thanks, Chair. I've just got 3 points. I'll take them separately if that's okay. Thanks. Just feedback to Amy on the algae, situation. I'm a bit concerned that if we focus too much on the risk and not about the other side, which is the benefit to the community, then you might have a situation where like hundreds or maybe 1,000 residents are upset because they can't no longer go swimming at Walpole Tidal Pool because then there's no pressure washing. So I think we need to take the risks with the benefits, and that's definitely a health benefit that lots of our residents do take up. It wasn't really a question, but just more of a comment. So the second point is just berths 4 and 5, which is a question. It was mentioned about the conveyor belt being installed on the berth, on the pontoon. I'm just wondering who pays that? Is that TDC or is that Brett's?
My understanding is that that's a Brett's cost in terms of the actual conveyor belt and the installation of it. In terms of the project itself, it's nearing completion, as you know, Councillor Yates, and all substantial works need to be completed by Friday, the end of this month, because that's the period of time that the permissions are in place for. Not much more to say. Was there anything else that you wanted to ask in relation to 4-5 apart from the conveyor belt? No. Okay.
I just had one more, sorry. It's about homelessness and clause 5.7. It mentions this £1 million financial pressure we're currently facing. I think it's fair to say that this winter's going to be incredibly hard for a lot of our residents. And I can only see this pressure increasing. And I don't really see how we mitigate it as a council. I think the mitigations we can put in place are, my question, I guess, would be, are there any risks? Is there any mitigation we can do which would have a serious impact? And if not, I think it is fair for Cabinet to consider this as a serious risk, as you mentioned for the other point, Chris. So, yeah.
So in terms of the mitigation, there's a couple of angles you can look at it. Firstly, financial mitigation in terms of trying to get the cost down of the project. One way we're looking at doing that is through Foy House. Once that is in place, that will mean we'll be able to house families at a lower cost than the placements they're currently using. Obviously, that doesn't tackle the number of households that are presenting as homeless. To address and mitigate that, we're actually considering that the corporate management team next week on Tuesday at our regular meeting, as part of the budget setting process for this financial year for 22-23, we included an extra £400,000 in the budget. There's some flexibility as to how we can use that, and we'll be considering whether if some additional staffing resources into the service will actually help us manage down those numbers in terms of further preventative work that we can do to stop houses or homelessness becoming an increasing problem. But it is a demand-led service. It's one of those. It's a service that we've got less scope for sort of traditional financial controls in place to manage down spending. If we're overspending on another service area, Section 151 officer, I can say, or across a variety of different service areas, we just need to stop spending, enter no new contractual arrangements or recruitment freeze. Can't do that with homelessness because we don't directly control the number of homes that present as homelessness. We can only put measures in place to try and reduce the numbers and to mitigate the numbers that are coming through the system.
Councillor Yates, I just wanted to respond a little bit more on the algae. We're not intending not to clean areas to discourage people to come. In fact, some of the areas that we don't clean, it's because it's only as egress from the sea. It's not actually a public entrance onto the beach. But of course, the tidal areas, the pools, the revetment, all of the really high used areas, of course, they'll still be subject to the same cleaning schedule. But we're more talking about places where they're not actually naturally in high usage areas, which really don't need to be cleaned as regularly. So it's not about discouraging people from coming or anything like that, but it's also about protecting our own interests and what we can do realistically as a council, and also encouraging things like the open water swimming, which I know you're quite interested in. So I just wanted to say, I didn't mean to come across crass with how we've been trying to repudiate claims, but it's more about trying to get the right balance, basically, between what we can physically do and what we should be doing as well. So that was just wanted to clarify that for you.
No, thank you very much. That's much appreciated. And I'll take the point on about the extra 400,000, and I think that's sensible. I think it is a serious risk though with this winter that number is going to escalate and escalate and escalate. So we'll have to keep our eye on it.
Councillor Towning.
We talked about the beaches and, managing them better, reducing the risk on there from barbecues and such like. Have we ever explored the possibility of utilizing an organization to actually sponsor our beaches? you know. And then they pay us a lump sum of money for having that sponsorship for it. And then we utilize that money, because every time you say, hey, what about some enforcement? We go, no money. And what we need to do is to explore these areas of commercializing ourselves a bit more, to reduce that risk, to take on, that positive, let's get out there and find someone who will do it for us. Now, I do know that someone was engaged in talking to someone locally about that. And you do know, Chris, that I've been involved in raising money for the beaches, okay? But, I'm happy to engage in that area of commercializing ourselves to get that money in and reduce the risk on that beach, which I have seen regularly happening.
I can't comment on what we've done in the past unless Matthew can, but I can't. He's shaking his head, so I'm assuming not. But it sounds like a worthy suggestion, Councillor, and something I'm happy for us to take back to our corporate management team for further discussion.
Councillor Hopkinson.
Thank you, Chair. Just on the algae, people falling over, etc. I know he talks about, rightly talks about we've got to consider our liability. I wonder if there are also, maybe there are other ways we can think about actually, reducing the actual number of people that are falling. I know obviously people take their own responsibility for that, but I wonder, I don't actually know what is the signage, and are we designing that in-house, and is it worth trying to rethink that, and if there are other alternatives to, collaboratively with the community trying to get people to not do it. I know there's no perfect solution, but I wonder if there is a way. And just another question, if it's okay, another one. With the Jackie Baker's roof, this is the roof of the training, what's it called, the changing rooms, yeah. And so I just wonder who would be using that if it was still usable, and are we considering, repairing it? Is there a viable way to doing that?
Thank you, Councillor. In terms of the algae, I need to look into that. Yes, I do agree, actually, that, having a more collaborative response. Not the problem, but what we've found is, in the few claims that we've had, it tends to be on slipways, not so much the revetment or the steps. We've had some claims on the slipways, which, as we know, are designed really for launching boats, and some people do use them for dog walking and so on and so forth. Of course, we want people to enjoy our coasts and our beaches and so on, but we must be able to warn them of the dangers that do arrive. This is a coastal area, that isn't really designed for people to go dog walking, but of course we're not just going to shut it off. So I do think that, yes, you're right, a more collaborative approach should be used. I know that Luke Glover in Technical is working very hard on algae, and he's working very hard with people like the Environment Agency, with our insurers, with risk management, and so on and so forth, and looking at models from other councils that have foreshores to see what type of signage they can actually use and is effective. From my perspective, looking as an insurance person, we look to reduce the liability, and that's my remit. Luke's going to look at it from a technical point, and I'm sure the beach manager and the beach and coastal manager will be looking at it from a tourism and from a local perspective. So I think that this isn't over by any stretch of the imagination, and I think that we are trying a collaborative approach. We don't want to discourage people from using the beach, but we do want them to be safe. All right. And I'll pass over to Matt in terms of Jackie Baker's. Thank you.
Just further as well in relation to the work that Luke's doing from a technical perspective in the Environment Agency, when he starts taking forward coastal schemes moving forward, he'll be looking at opportunities where we've got high footfall areas where over the years some of the slipways have become access to the beach by default. He will be looking at, when they put a new scheme in, to look at the foreshore, that there's maybe an opportunity to put some sort of proper steps in which were actually more suitable for people gaining access, so, like they are elsewhere. It's a massive piece of work, but could be picked up as part of those coastal works, whereas at the moment we couldn't just do it independently. It's not possible. With regards to Jackie Bakers, there is actually a group that's within the organisation that's looking at opportunities for Jackie Bakers moving forward in terms of wider schemes, what we could do with that site to make it more user-friendly, better facilities, whether we could get external funding to deliver, you know, reinstate things like the 4G pitch rather than the old AstroTurf. And part of that would be looking at the building itself and whether there's an opportunity for that, because it may not be the best location for it, and repairing and replace it, it would be better to replace than repair. So it might be part of a bigger scheme moving forward, depending on how that pans out. There's no limit in terms of what the opportunities are. Cricket, football, hockey, you know, there are opportunities, and there used to be pitches up there, grass pitches, and and that main pitch used to be used for hockey as well, and they exist elsewhere and they're well used. So, but it's about looking at what does the district need, because there's no point putting in a massive scheme when we've exhausted opportunities elsewhere within the district, because more of the sort of private sector have started developing those type of arrangements.
Did you know that at one time, Thanet used to run the largest hockey festival in Europe? They used to. Yeah, they used to. Male and female.
Okay. So just wrapping it up. The recommendation is to approve the review of the corporate risks. Please can I have a proposer and a seconder. Proposed by Councillor Shrub and seconded by Councillor Garner. Unless I hear any objection, I take this as approved.
Chair, we have another recommendation to refer to Cabinet.
Yes. And in addition to that, we had a recommendation to refer to Cabinet for the algae at the PSPO and the homelessness. Are we happy with that? Proposed by Councillor Shrub, seconded by Councillor Garner. Unless I hear any objection, I will take this as approved. Fab. That concludes the business for tonight's meeting. I declare this meeting closed at 20:26. Good night.